Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Miraculous Thinking. And today we're going to be exploring section 2 of the Surrender Experiment, where we get to follow up with Mickey on his incredible journeys to really awakening to who he is and understanding how to really align with all aspects of himself, from the small self to the big self. So, if you want to learn how he does it and learn some ways that you can apply that to your own life to further your journey of self discovery and surrender, then stay tuned. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Miraculous Thinking. I'm your host, Elenique Marie, and with me, the beautiful, the one, and the only Crystal Ann Compton.
Hi.
And we are so happy to be back. And we're so sorry that we were MIA for a couple of weeks, but we want to talk about that.
Yeah,
Crystal,
wait.
you want to
Well,
talk
I
about
mean,
that?
the first time we were MIA, like we missed a whole week, I was sick. And then we came
Hmm.
back for a week. We started the surrender experiment.
Yes,
And then the next week you got sick.
that's right.
And I just think it's so interesting that it's common for me to get sick in Januaries
Huh.
because like I'm moving out energy from the year before or something. Like last
Okay.
year I had deep COVID, honey. Oh, like weeks
Oh,
and weeks. And it was during the intuitive intensive. And I
oh
was
my
just
God.
struggling so deeply. And I think the year before that I was ill too. And I don't get ill a lot, but at the top of the year, for some reason, that's when my body decides to move stuff around. And then you got
Yeah.
sick.
Yes. And I have been dodging all kinds of colds and COVID because my husband and my son keep bringing stuff. But then I just couldn't move fast enough this time,
Right.
it
Yeah,
seems,
it got you.
because it caught up. I couldn't run fast enough. But it was awful. It was just awful.
Yeah,
So I'm still like struggling a little bit with like congestion. So yeah,
me too. I'm a little
glad it's behind.
phlegmy. But the thing
Hmm.
is that when your body tells you to stop and to rest, you got to do it. And you know,
Yeah, you
the
do.
interesting thing is when Trisha and I used to do all of the intensives, and like we were working with big medicine, I would say, like just big spiritual concepts and energy, we would always like I would have like certain issues that I would have. Typically, this would be digestive or stuff would come up in the body. And then she would have the same thing over there, like her eyes, she'd get styes. Like it was
Oh
every
my
single year.
God.
And I really believe that it's the quality of the energy that you're interacting with
Mm,
and working with.
mm,
And your body being of a bit of a lower signature, that's not a judgment. It's just the denser flesh materiality. Like it has to
mhm.
catch up sometimes to the divine energy that you're working with or that's flowing through you. So I'm wondering if the surrender experiment, honey, is just knocking us on our little
Mm.
butts because the energy of it is very important, maybe. I don't know. Just trying to make
I
sense.
like that. I like thinking about it that way. One, because it makes me feel like change is happening, which I
Mhm.
love. And you are going to have a shift, and shifts are uncomfortable, right? Like when you're shifting out of old ways of being or thinking, there is such discomfort that it usually turns people right back into doing the same behavior
Mhm.
because you don't want to sit. Like when you're detoxing, when you have a detox from sugar, or people that have struggled with addiction and have had to do drug addictions. I mean, there's that part where it gets really worse before it gets better.
Yeah, that's a
And
phenomenon called something, and I always want to call it Braxton Hicks, but I know that's not it. That's labor, false labor. But it's like
it's
your symptoms get exacerbated and super acute right before they begin to start to diminish. So it can be really difficult
exactly.
to put up with that. Yeah.
Yes, that's also called Thanksgiving
Yes.
and any other major family holiday where it gets really bad before you just like
Yes.
surrender and like, I have to be with these people for the next 4 days. You know what
It's
I
it's
mean?
just gonna happen. You got to be
Oh my
here.
God, you just have to deal with it. So yes, so we're sorry about that, you guys, but
But I
life
mean, at the
happens.
same time, we
So
shouldn't apologize. Life happens, like you
true.
said. Right. I should say that, our regular schedule is weekly. Our plan or vision is weekly broadcasts or episodes to be released on Wednesday, which is when this episode will come out. So hopefully we can get back in the schedule. And, I think it's been 6 months that we've been doing this. I want to say we started
Has
in
it?
September. I think this would be our formal 6 month. Yeah.
What? That
I
flew by.
It did, but we went through one we went through two books. Is this only our third book? I think it is only our third book.
We did the Don Miguel Ruiz. We did the Kabbalion.
We did three books. This is our fourth book. Right.
Yes.
And we did Feeling is the Secret. And then we did a month of
Secret.
human design.
True.
Wow.
I'm proud of us.
Well, and I'm just having fun. That's the cool thing.
Me
I'm
too.
just getting to read these awesome books. I do want to tell you that we received over the last 2 weeks, for some reason, we received 3 emails from people who are reading this book with us or who are listening along. And I can't tell you how thrilled that makes me. I'm just like, oh my God, we're not alone.
I know. That's amazing.
It is. I mean, and we aren't alone. We have a lot of listeners every week, but maybe we should get into some of these questions. Are you game before we start talking about the surrender?
I would love that. I would love it.
Let me get into the first one. This one's from Jennifer. She says, Dearest Crystal Ann and Elenique, thank you for sharing yourselves with us. The way you interact is very soothing. When I found your podcast, I found new friends in you. When the surrender experiment was mentioned in an earlier podcast, I checked it out from the library and enjoyed it so much. Then you chose it for review because you were unable to obtain the Course in Miracles book. Synchronicity. Lovely to hear your take on it. Why do you think that we ended up with the surrender experiment instead of Path of Light? Is that what it's called?
Yes, Path of Light. I personally believe that it's very interesting because, as you know, my book came out last week or whatever it was, January 22nd. And immediately I started writing another one because I just felt like I had to. And the topic of the book is really about surrender. And I think it cannot be a coincidence that we selected a book that is making me revisit what did that surrender experience look like for me, especially through the loss of my son and through breast cancer, and trying to re-examine what were the skills or what was the knowing that allowed me to just let go and be brave. And he talks about that today. And I wrote down a paragraph or like a quote that he says about how people think that surrender is a kind of weakness, but it actually takes incredible courage to do.
Yes.
And so actually it takes incredible strength, right? So I just think that it was just the synchronous, for me personally, it has brought to me the opportunity to re-examine what does that look like for others and what can it look like for me. So, Source always looking out for us.
That's right.
And I know we also want to do a retreat and a workshop, and we also want to explore this and how do we implement this in everyday life. How about you? What do you think it?
Honestly, I think it's just about timing. It's about receiving the content that we need right now for whatever reason, trusting the process. Like if the door is not opening, okay, there's something else that is being opened at the same time, and just being intuitive enough to follow that and not judge it. And so I just think this is what I need to be reading right now. And I never read through the whole book. I only read like the sections we're supposed to read per week because I don't want to talk about stuff that's in the future. Yes. Like I do actually have some questions about this particular book and hoping he's going to address some of it in the future, but I don't know because I haven't read it, because I like to read the sections and then download with you and see it in a different kind of a way. You know what I mean? Like a holistic, holographic 360 way. Yeah.
Me too. I'm doing the same thing. And also I want to, as we saw in section 2, where in section 1, he wrote that entire dissertation without any research, right? And he just allowed it to flow. And in section 2, he begins teaching those classes with no syllabus. And so I feel like when we come to these with only the reading that we've done without overanalyzing it or getting ahead of it, it just allows something real and organic to happen, in this energy.
Yes. And so we're just we're surrendering to what was available and what was showing up in the field. And we're saying, yes, that's right. We're surrendering to the surrender experiment.
I love it. Oh, I love it. Yes. That's a good one.
Okay. Second email comes from Vanessa. She says, hi there. I love the podcast. But this is for you. This is a question all for you. Okay.
Oh, okay.
How does a manifester do the surrender experiment if they are meant to initiate. And also, manifester is a human design type. We talked all about human design in December. Go back and check that out. There's also a second question, actually. She says, do manifestors have to use their discernment a lot in order to figure out what is divinely guided or inspired versus the ego or illusion? In your own opinion, how does one develop a strong skill to discern? So, why don't we start with the first question, which is, how does a manifestor do the surrender experiment if they're supposed to initiate?
Okay, Vanessa, what a great bunch of questions. First of all, a manifester is an initiator, but they're doing so from that internal nonverbal dialogue that they are having essentially with source. So the second part of that, which you asked, is does it mean they have to have so much more discernment? Absolutely. Because if you can't tell what the voice of the divine sounds like over your own ego, and your own conditioning, you will not know how to take right action. You will not know how to correctly initiate. So certainly that is foundational for manifestors. And actually, I find that that is the biggest challenge for a manifestor is how do I develop a communication with the divine that is trustworthy? And how you do it, in my opinion, is with becoming present and learning to get to know yourself and really doing that inner work. Because if you have a lot of conditioning, if you have a lot of trauma, if you have a lot of crutches and fears that are driving you, that divine light, even though it's coming in as inspiration, is getting filtered through a muddy pipe. And I think we've used this analogy so many times before, this metaphor of the dirty pipe,
Mm-hmm.
but it's accurate. So that beautiful message will become distorted. And so, meditation, I know people hate hearing this, but honestly, and you can see with Mickey, his
Mm-hmm.
whole journey began and became possible through that discipline that comes. You need to be able to recognize that voice in your mind that is not you, let it become still, or let it keep talking here, but you're not really paying attention. And then a very still energy comes down, something that doesn't even feel like you. It's a very different signature, and it's peaceful and it's confident. It's never critical. It's never rushed. It's just this knowing that comes. And to me, that is when you know you're getting a real transmission from the divine, from source, from your higher self. So that takes quite a bit of discipline. I don't know what you
Yeah.
think about that, Crystal.
I think that makes sense. It actually speaks a little bit to our next question, which we can get into. But so a manifester can surrender, but they're surrendering to the divine inspiration. And it is up to the manifester to determine, well, to familiarize themselves really with
Yes.
the voice of that divine energy and inspiration.
Perfect. That's exactly what it is. The only thing to whom a manifestor surrenders is to source, because we all surrender to source ultimately. None of us is exempt from that because that is the creator
Mm-hmm.
and we are an expression of that, right? So we at all moments through our own blueprint, our own character, and our own role that we're meant to act out in the world, we are never supreme to that. We are aligned with that and serving the purpose of that higher love that is trying to make its way through us to make the world better.
And so it is.
And
All
so
right,
it is.
final email. We had a couple of thoughts in this email.
Okay.
This is from Lisa Anderson. She says, hello, Elenique and Crystal. My name is Lisa. I am writing to you from Williams Lake, BC, Canada. I have been in the Lightworkers Lab for a couple of years, and I love you ladies. And just by the way, the Lightworkers Lab is my spiritual community that we've had for, I don't know, several years. It's on Facebook, and anybody can join. She says, I'm really enjoying your podcast. I just wanted to share a couple of comments I have on the book. I have read up to the second section of the book so far. And of course, this week we are going to get into the second section.
Mm-hmm.
She says, I've noticed a couple of things changing my life and have started to document things for myself. I have also really been enjoying the meditations. I did have sort of a suggestion. I was wondering if maybe you could play a little bit of calming music after you're done with your meditation. Today, while I was meditating, all of a sudden it cut from your voice, then straight to the next podcast. It startled me pretty badly. I guess I was pretty focused. Anyways, just a thought. And I totally get what she's saying.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah, we
Yes.
can probably just tack on an
Sorry about
extra.
that, Lisa. We will.
That's
Yeah, we'll add
yeah,
in.
because it just clicks over to your next
It's so
podcast episode.
true. It's
You
so
know where
true.
this used to happen all the time when I was listening to The Gateway Experience by Robert Monroe. He had these
Yes.
I bought all of the CDs. I spent
Oh
hundreds
my
of dollars
gosh.
back in the was it the 90s? But he
Yeah.
had such a grandpa's gravelly voice.
He
There
did.
was nothing that was soothing about it. And when he would cut in after like
Uh,
a 10-minute, astral adventure, it would be like so startling. It would literally scare me back into my body.
yes.
So I understand what Lisa's saying.
Oh my
So,
gosh. I
yeah.
know. Do you remember when he would go deep, like to focus 15 or
Mhm.
focus 20 or whatever it was? And he's like, now you
I
will
know.
hear the sound of my voice
I'm
and
like,
you
oh
will
my God.
respond to it. And we're like, oh
It was
no,
so
what
jarring.
happened?
It was
It's
terrible.
so scary.
I mean, I would have to turn it down so much because I knew at some point his voice would come back
He's
on.
gonna pop back in.
Super counterintuitive. But yes, what we can do is
Oh
add
God.
maybe 20 or 30 seconds and just kind of slowly fade out so that they'll get the prompt
What a
and
great suggestion. I
make
will
it a little.
definitely
Thank you for that.
do that for sure.
Super easy. Then she says, a question I have about Michael's teachings, of course, Michael Singer is the author of The Surrender Experiment. She says, I'm wondering if he's suggesting that we surrender to any and everything that people ask of us. That made me wonder if I was asked out on a date and I was uncomfortable, what would I do? Surrender to a request from a date or still be able to say no? Did Michael just become a yes man of sorts? I guess I'm wondering where the fine line is on surrendering to experiences, but also still being allowed to make your own choices if it really doesn't seem safe.
This was the question I was asking myself the first time I read the book. This time that I'm reading the book, I was having the same question. So what I have found is a distinction. What he says is, and actually I made a highlight on for my notes here, where he says, I decided to just stop listening to all the chatter about my personal preferences
Mm-hmm.
and instead start the willful practice of accepting what the flow of life was presenting. Perhaps this change in focus would quiet things. So I think what he's saying is if you just say no to somebody, just because your mind is going like, I think I like his shoes. I don't like that restaurant. I don't like the car he drives. If you're looking for these very superficial preferences to use as a reason why you are saying no to the date, then you're really not allowing life to present you something to respond to in an organic way. If I believe, at least this would be the distinction for me, if I have an internal knowing and my gut and authority, for those of you following human design, if your particular authority, like for me it's splenic, I'll just get like a pulse one time that says yes, no. If that one says no and you are in integrity, then I'm going to follow my authority. I feel life in all ways should always be a balance. So you can surrender, but you're not going to be like, and somebody's like, come down this dark alley with me. And you're like, yes, okay, sir. No, use your intelligence, use your authority, use your own agency. But notice if you're doing it because it's just, this conditioning and this talking voice, or is it really internal and deep and unknowing? I think what he started to do is just stop letting his personal limiting preferences and conditioning keep him from accepting things that could be transformational. At least that's what I'm interpreting from it.
Yes, I think so as well. But I mean, I had this question as I was reading this section because there is a section where this woman named Sandy Boone just starts walking on his land
Yeah.
and just, taking contemplative Zen walks. And then at some point, she's like, can I pitch a tent on your land? And he wants to say no, right? Inside, he's screaming,
Right.
absolutely not. This is my land. But he
Mm-hmm.
lets her. And then he goes away to a retreat. We'll talk about it all, but he goes away to a retreat. He
Right.
comes back. This woman has built a house on his land. And
I
I'm like,
know.
I cannot imagine
Mm-mm.
in Crystal Ann Compton in present day year of our Lord 2023 putting up with that. So I'm like, so are you being a doormat or are you being divinely inspired? And so that does take me to the idea that there is, well, and I know that there's a divine flow. There's a divine flow. And if it's being offered by
Mhm,
God, being offered by universe, that's going to feel a certain way. It really is to
mhm.
me about refining the instrument of you so that you can tell the
Correct.
difference between divine flow and somebody's just trying to pitch a tent on your land because they want to take your property. And now they have
Exactly.
squatters' rights and you can't get rid of them. This
Mm.
is where my mind goes. My ego
Oh
mind
my gosh, me
starts
too.
going all these other places.
Me too.
But if it is divine flow, and as it turns out, this is because they
Mhm,
develop a meditation group that has been going on for 40 years. If it is
mhm.
divine flow, when it reaches you, you're going to feel it as a certain thing, right? And also, if it's
Totally.
not for you, you're going to feel that too.
And you do see the struggle. It's not like he just is like,
Mhm.
"Oh, hey, Sandy, okay, pitch a tent." Apparently, though, Michael has a much broader field of comfort in the uncomfortable
Mhm.
than the average Joe. I mean, this is a guy that lived out of his truck, in the middle of Mexico on a hill. Like, these are not things that I do.
And
Like,
I'm
I'm not going to go
thinking,
to
where are
Mexico.
you pooping? How does
Yes.
that work?
Where's
Where
the
are you
running
showering?
water?
I
You
mean, like,
know,
definitely has a broader experience of the uncomfortable, and he's okay with it.
Totally. He's okay with it. So we can't be Michael Singer, and we
Mm-mm.
don't need to be. We need to be us, given what we are comfortable with and how open and allowing we can be to our own limitations. And I think that that's the thing again, like just take it easy. Like I think that's what I've learned the hard way. I used to sit for 4 hours a day, 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the night, trying to meditate because that's what my teacher did.
Mhm.
And I was a mom. So I was getting up at like 5 o'clock in the morning trying to meditate from 5 to 7, trying to meditate after everybody went to bed, like at 10 o'clock at night, trying to get it into 12 o'clock, feeling so guilty and so bad. And then I realized, what am I talking about? This is not the stage in life. My teacher is a dude that lives in the woods. So he can meditate for 4 or 10 hours. What does he care? I have to go feed these children. So just pacing yourself and being kind with where you are in your process.
I think, if nothing else, by reading this book, to develop the ability to question where your preferences are coming from, to
Yes.
question whether this is ego mind, ego narratives based in patterns within us versus divine flow, that is an eternal skill. And so, like, figuring out how that feels. Oh, this is just my monkey mind. Because here again, up until he starts this book, when he's having the conversation with his brother-in-law, he thinks he is his ego mind. That's who
Right.
he is. And so, developing the ability to pop out of that and check out your feeling, check out
Hmm.
the thought, check out the idea from a higher place. That's what we're here to do. Not necessarily say yes to absolutely everything.
Absolutely. And re-identifying with that new way of being, like, who am I? Who is this?
Mhm.
Like, who is here? And noticing you are not those thoughts. That already is going to transform your life. You don't even have to do what Michael did. Michael Mickey. I feel like I should be calling him Mickey because he doesn't seem to be happy with being called Michael. So
Mhm.
Mickey, he really does. I think just to make you present. And what we start to see in part 2 is that presence doesn't have to happen just when you're on a meditation cushion.
Mhm.
That presence actually should be in all places, as you're cooking, when you're driving, even when you're active, even when you're fighting, even when you're being so horribly human. You can still be watching yourself be
Mhm.
horribly human and flawed and selfish. And yet you can have distance from it and know, I am not this.
And Don Miguel Ruiz, when we were talking about the four agreements, he likens these thoughts to the mitote, to the marketplace of ideas. Like, your mind is always chattering, talking, talking, talking. But the inspiration or the challenge is to rise above the mitote and to look down upon it, take in the conversations, but then make the decision from that different place. So, very
Yes,
similar idea coming
very.
through in this book. I think there's another part of this. Yes, there is. So Lisa goes on to say, also, I do believe that Mickey is channeling very similar to Abraham Hicks. I've been following her teachings for years and I do see the similarities. One thing I've noticed is that Esther She says that we need to spend more time in the dream state and imagining the reality that we want and really feeling it there in order to attract it. Whereas Mickey says that we need to spend more time in reality and not in the dream state. So while I feel like they are similar, I also see the differences. I was just wondering if you guys see this too. She then says, sorry for the lengthy letter, but I've really been enjoying this. Looking forward to hearing your next video. Please don't apologize. We love it. So I love this distinction because I think he's struggling with this right now in section 2. Whereas Esther says you need to be in the imaginal spaces, you need to attract it in the vortex, if you will, in order to draw it down into 3D reality. Mickey is saying that he has to be more human and grounded to the earth reality in order to be fully functioning in the life. And we get to it in this beautiful passage that we will talk about, where he realizes that he has been preferring these astral experiences, his practices, to the exclusion of really understanding who he is. And he talks about how he kind of locked up this monkey mind, the self that he is, the smaller self, if you will. He locked him up in a room and forced him to meditate when really he should have embraced that aspect of himself. It takes all of you in order to ascend. So I think he had to figure out a way to pop out of the astral and back to the planet because he was getting addicted to meditating all the time. And I guess that's helpful for someone who's meditating all the time because they're refining their frequency and that's always affecting the field for all of us. But at the same time, we came here to be human. We have a purpose here. We came here to have certain relationships and we have a purpose. And it doesn't necessarily always serve us to be in 4th dimensional or 5th dimensional reality, as opposed to right here where we are. We're trying to escape a lot of the times.
Yeah. I think that it probably begins as we're fully associated into the human small s self. That's who we are. We begin the process of awakening. So we go into the imaginal space, meditative place to try to elevate the frequency, to try to distance from the illusion, right? But then there comes a moment when after you've gone up, you've got to complete the circle by grounding back down. And I think that both of them are right. But I think what he's doing is completing the circle. I think he's saying, okay, I'm doing this Esther Hicks thing. I'm visualizing, I'm meditating, I'm opening to the divine flow. But now, what do I do with the fact that I am the spiritual being in a physical body? And that physical body has to be in physical reality and take action in physical form. And so I think that that's the dance that we're all trying to do. But first, we do need to do that inner work of clarifying and knowing what we are, and then coming to play the role in physical form, allowing for the imperfections of the vehicle, not taking it seriously, and yet at the same time recognizing that we are not that, because that's where the power is. The power comes from the distance that we have while still loving and embracing this, toy that we've been given to come and learn that has things that it enjoys, like, Chianti, or, like these amazing things that we have on planet Earth that are beautiful, the fresh strawberry, a Godiva chocolate. Like, why not? Like, why can't you have that and still be up in the ethers connecting with source? Why does it have to be all or nothing? And I think that's where we go back to balance.
And the reality is that we exist in all of these spaces already. So us trying to pop out into 5D to hang out with Christ consciousness, we're already in 5D. Our orientation is here in 3D because we came to have this specific experience. And I do think people get addicted to practice. I do think people get addicted to being somewhere else. It is about striking the balance and not doing your practice and having all of these blissed out experiences to the exclusion of your human experience, because you make that connection in order to inform this experience. And it's beautiful being human, I agree. And it's also difficult and it's hard. And it becomes spiritual bypassing when you do it to the exclusion of what you came here to do with your purpose and serving at the highest level. But there again, the yogi meditating on the mountain day and night, he's also probably serving his purpose, just in a different way.
Yes.
So no judgment.
No judgment. Everybody's here and we can't judge their path or their experience. But I just remember in high school, one of my friends' mom was hardcore, like meditator. Like she would leave them and go for like 5 months to India and like meditate in an ashram. But these her kids were like in high school and junior high. And I was kind of like, what's happening? But the crazy part was that when she wasn't meditating, she was like the meanest person
Really?
ever. Like she was just so like judgy and like everything had to be, so extreme in her paradigms of, if she was like hardcore vegan or vegetarian before it was even a thing. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I was just like, this doesn't seem to make any sense. How are you meditating, 18 hours a day? But you're not around for your children, which is a role that you chose.
Hmm.
Okay, you could have just not had kids and you could have gone and been a happy Buddha, but you took on a role, which to me personally, you need to fulfill before you can just drop everybody and disappear. That's just me.
Yeah.
And on top of that, when you come, you're this super mean person, even though you only talk about peace and meditating and saving the world. So, these are the dichotomies. These are the things that we kid ourselves because you can be as egoic being a spiritual persona
A hundred
as you
percent.
can being a regular Joe.
100%. I've met a lot of those people. And also people who are trying to put on the clothing of enlightenment because
Mm.
they want it very much. And so they're kind of performing enlightenment, but not experiencing it.
Performing
Right.
enlightenment.
Well, and Jesus even
Yes.
said, you will know them by their fruit. And what he means by that, I think, is you will know them by their frequency. You can feel when
Mhm.
someone is in alignment with source or in alignment with love or in alignment with their higher self. That's a vibration. And so to come back from 5 months in an ashram to be judgmental and hypocritical and mean, well, there's a disconnect.
Definitely.
Well, these emails were great. Thank you so much. We
Yes,
love to
thank
hear,
you.
we have so much fun just talking about these books and all of the books that we're going to be going through. But it's really wonderful knowing that you're there with us, that you are also reading this material, thinking about it, and contributing your opinions and commentary. So if anybody would like to reach out and give us a question or a thought, all you have to do is write to us via email at miraculousthinking@gmail.com. That's miraculousthinking, one word, @gmail.com. We read everything and we love to answer. We spent, I don't know, a half an hour answering your questions and we love
Love
to do
it.
it.
Yeah, and it totally tied into what we're talking about
Yeah.
today. So in a way, we've answered some of the points. So I'm so excited. Thank you for allowing us to segue into what we're going to discuss today.
And so, what we are going to discuss today again is the book The Surrender Experiment by Michael A. Singer. We are presently in section 2. That is what I read. And what
Hmm.
I did is just kind of recapped each chapter, just like little blurbs. And I thought we could just kind of use that as a map to go through it and then talk about each thing as we go. Is that cool?
I love it.
Okay. Well, so we start with the first chapter in section 2, where Mickey is making this realization that the ego mind is narrating preferences. And so, what would happen if instead of following preferences, he actually dropped those and just surrendered to what was showing up in his life? And so, he decides to do it in that first chapter.
I love it. I love it when he said that it dawned on him that paragraph we just discussed about that the majority of his mental activity revolved around likes and dislikes.
Isn't that
And boy, can
crazy?
I relate.
It's
Yeah,
true.
it's all we do. God,
Hmm.
it's too hot. Why is there so much traffic? I don't like this chicken needs more salt. Like the whole thing is just critique, or I do like it or I don't like it. That's 99% of the thoughts
It
when we
is.
start paying
What
attention.
a lot of white noise. Like,
Oh
what
my
would we
God.
hear if we stopped hearing that, which is the whole point of this book? In the next section, his professor, Professor Goffman, asks him to tutor a banker for his doctorate because apparently they're opening a new school. And in order for there to be a president of the school, that president has to have his doctorate. But so they want to appoint a
Mhm.
banker, but he doesn't have his doctorate. So Professor Goffman asks Mickey if he will tutor this banker. And immediately he's like, are you kidding me? Absolutely
No.
not. I'm waiting to get back to my property, get back into my little house and start meditating again. But the professor persists, and he ultimately says yes. He meets this banker who's a great guy. He's wearing a three-piece suit, whereas Mickey is always in his like sandals, his jeans, his denim shirt, and his ponytail. But they end up getting along really well and develop kind of a neat relationship.
Yes, I love that. And I really felt for him when he had to say yes, or when he felt that he needed to say yes to the request. I was like, man, I don't think I could have done that.
I don't
Like,
know if I could
I
have
would have been
either.
like, no, I am going back in the woods. I can barely handle showing up here to teach these classes. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, yeah, such respect for his commitment to, what he's decided to do, his experiment.
Right. He made the commitment to do it, so he's saying yes to it.
Hmm.
And so he has to prep this banker for, I guess, 3 exams that he's going to need to
Yes.
take in order to get his doctorate. And then the banker turns around, his name is Alan. I think the banker turns around and says, well, why don't you take the exams with me? He doesn't want to because he has no desire
Hmm.
whatsoever to pursue this path anymore.
Hmm.
But the banker asks and he surrenders and says, okay. I mean, he's already been prepping him for 2 of the 3 exams, but I guess
Hmm.
that 3rd exam he doesn't know much about, correct?
No, exactly. So he's really worried that he's going to totally bomb. And so he has to go through the process of, why do I care if I bomb?
Hmm.
And he realizes that there's still ego there. The ego of like being found not intelligent or to be judged by others for failing. So then he realizes, oh, this is another way for me to overcome that
Right.
that ego in me. And so he's like, okay, I'll do it. This
But like
guy.
the night before, doesn't he like look through, he pulls the book out
Yes.
that he's supposed to be studying and he
Yes.
plays a little Bible bingo, which is like he lets the book open up to whatever page, he takes a look at it, he absorbs it. Like he does this a couple of times. He's certainly not studying anything. And then when
Mm-mm.
he goes to take his exams, those sections that he played Bible bingo and the page opened up to, those exact sections become questions in the exam and he's able to pass.
And not only that, but he does incredible.
Right. And he's like, what? I'm actually not. And he tells his professor, actually, I didn't really study. I mean, I've been tutoring this guy, but I didn't really know. And the professor says, stop being so humble.
Yeah.
So in another kind of interest, a passion that is emerging is his pursuit of Paramahansa Yogananda. He wants to learn Kriya Yoga, but through the Self Realization Institute, which is
Yeah. Fellowship.
Yogananda's fellowship,
Yeah.
thank you. Um, he has to, I guess, take courses for a full year before he can be initiated into the Kriya Yoga. And so he
Hmm.
writes and says, please, though, I mean, can I come in early? I'm really into it. And they write back, they send a letter saying, no, you have to do the full year. But on the same day that he receives that letter, he receives another letter from another Kriya Yoga retreat place saying, hey, we've got something going on this summer. You're
Yeah.
invited.
And he doesn't even know how they got his house address in the woods
How
of
did you know
Florida.
who I was? And I'm thinking, well,
Yeah.
self-realization fellowship is probably selling your mailing address to people.
It's
This is where
terrible.
my cynical ego mind goes. But like,
Oh my God,
or
don't make me laugh.
yeah, they just find out about it. So he decides, okay, this opportunity is presenting itself. I'm super passionate about it. This summer, I know what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be going to this retreat. And so it's kind of just a series of serendipitous, synchronistic things that begin to emerge, not all of which he wants to do, some of which he does, though, right?
Yes.
After this happens, his banker, who's now his friend, Alan, comes and tells him that he wants Mickey to teach a class at the school that he's the president of. And here again, Mickey's like, absolutely not. This is nothing I want to do. I feel like I've been telling you guys this. Why aren't you listening to me? He's like, no. And the banker says, well, I'm not asking. To me, I'm just like, then you can beat it. I mean, I get my hackles
Uh,
up. I'm like, what do you mean you're not asking? This is my life. It's sovereign. But because he made the commitment to the surrender experiment, and because Alan, the banker, came into his life divinely, he says, yes, sir. What did you think about that?
I found that one hard because I can't imagine somebody just telling me that, they're telling me to go teach a class. I'd be like, "Go fly." You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I had the same reaction as you. I'm like, don't you're not the boss of me." But, again, he just shows how fully committed he is to this. And, like, that question that we had about, like, when is it that you're just being a yes man,
Mhm.
or when is it really divinely inspired? And I remember that story we talked about karma, and how the wheel of karma is always moving, and depending where you stop it, it's either a blessing or a curse, however you want to look at it. So the thing is with these decisions, he acts, and they work out, and they could have also not worked out, because sometimes they have to not work out in order for you to get something even
Yes.
more important before they do work out. So I think that, in part 3 of the book, we're going to see where some of these things do become challenges
Mhm.
later in his life. He does go through struggles. It's not like every time he just does something and then it all just works out and it's fine and it was for the best. Things are going to happen to him because he is a human. So I think that I'm very excited for us to get to those parts where we then examine this concept of, you know, is it good or is it bad?
Right. It was around this point in the book where I realized that it wasn't just a shift of attention for Mickey. Like, okay, I'm not going to give into my predilections and my preferences. It was also an initiation of opportunity, meaning he called this in intentionally. He said, okay, from now on, this is how I'm going to show up. I'm going to say, yes, I'm going to surrender, initiating a process and really opening up this chamber of possibility and inviting spirit in. And here's the thing about that, I believe. When we say, okay, I'm going to enter into this time in my life and I'm just going to say, yes, God, to whatever you show me, God starts showing you stuff. And
Mm,
so that was an interesting aha for me. It's like, okay, yeah, he's changing the way he's thinking, the way he's believing, his perceptions, but he's also initiating a process and moving in the direction of that. And so when we do that,
wow.
all of these possibilities, networking, opportunities, relationships, serendipities, all of these things accelerate, which I think we see in
That
this
is
life because
such
so many things
an
are happening.
incredible point, Crystal. And it goes to the question about Abraham Hicks. He set a chain reaction in motion
Mhm.
when he decided his own path to self realization was going to be through that surrender. So he
Right.
sent the universe a message.
Yes.
How I'm going to look for surrender is, or of self realization, is through this process of surrender. And when I surrender, you will send me what I need to do next.
Yes.
So he asked for
Yes.
it. And
Yep.
then it happened. And I had never thought about it that way, but you're right. So that's where he went into the Abraham Hicks void,
Mhm.
put in the instruction,
Yep.
came back out, and then followed the instruction. So it wasn't coincidence.
Mhm.
And it may not work like that for each of us because we're not putting in that same instruction. Maybe we say we want to be guided on the really big decisions, and we're okay doing the little decisions on our own and trusting our own intuition. So that's where we find our dance, and we program our experience, which has to
Mhm.
be uniquely our own. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
And
That
it
really,
it helps to take some of these reactions that I'm having to some of his yeses away. Because if what he's
yes,
done is initiated a specific path, then he's got to trust that path. He's asked for it and they're given it,
correct.
right?
Yeah.
So that makes more
Like
sense to
keto,
me. Yes.
like the keto diet.
Oh my God.
It's like, because look, there's so many ways to lose weight, right? So I'm thinking about it
Right.
like this. There's a million ways to lose weight,
Yeah.
and keto's one. When you initiate the keto sequence, you say goodbye apples, goodbye strawberries, goodbye bananas,
Are you doing
and you just
keto? Are you going to be doing it?
no, I did keto for a while, and I tell you what, I just can't do it anymore. Like, I can't do it anymore. I emotionally, psychologically can't see another egg for a while because I just had too much of it. So I try to eat lower carb, like
Yeah.
not, but I missed fruits and vegetables and things that were higher in sugar content. So no. And I was having a lot of aches in my body when I was
Hmm.
eating very high uh, protein,
So we are not
very.
surrendering to keto.
Yes. So now, if I choose another path, I'll get to the same destination. If I
Right.
decide to be vegan, I'll get to the same destination. If I decide to just exercise
Yep.
6 hours a week, I'll get there. So you see, each of us gets to pick how we get. to
Yes.
healthy.
That's funny. Sorry. I'm thinking about doing keto again. I'm just like, Jeremy and I were talking about it. And I'm like, I am so exhausted of the idea of doing this to myself. I
Yes.
prefer, I think, to eat whatever the F I want to eat, but just in really small portions like Dolly Parton did. I'm gonna go to the school of Dolly Parton. It's the Dolly experiment. That's what I'm gonna do.
Hey, let's do the Dolly experiment, but
I
like
would
in
love
so
to.
many ways. Like I
Yeah.
would like to start wearing wigs. You know what I mean? I just want to start wearing wigs.
Oh, I would
She's
wear a
so
wig with
feminine
you.
and cute, and
Oh my
she's so
gosh.
real and authentic and
And
talented
generous.
and
Oh my
generous, and
gosh.
I
Yes.
love her. So we love you, Dolly
We
Parton.
love
If
Dolly
anybody
Parton.
shares this podcast with you, we love you.
The Dolly experiment. Oh, you're writing a book.
Yes,
That might be the name of it. All right.
girl, I'm writing it down. I'm writing it down.
Oh, okay. So the next thing that happens is he goes on this job interview because his friend Alan, the banker, says, I'm not going to take no for an answer. And he shows up like he always shows up to everything, which is in his sandals and his jeans and his denim shirt and his ponytail. And the interviewer just asks him, okay, well, what class do you want to teach? And he said, well, I want to teach a class on how to get your mind to stop talking. And also, we need to understand that we're living on this planet, this little planet in the middle of this vast universe. We ought to be having fun. That's what I want to teach. And the lady's like, well, perfect. We have one class, which would be a great match for that. And so he asks for exactly what he wants. And she says, okay. And then he goes on to begin to teach this class.
I love it so much. I wish
And
somebody would let me teach a class like
oh my gosh,
that.
I want to attend a class like that because he,
Yes.
on his first day, he decides he's, like you said earlier, he's not preparing a syllabus. He's not, taking a bunch of copious notes. He doesn't have a plan or an outline. He's just going to show up, going to be finely attuned, like the tuning fork that he is. And then he's just going to open his mouth and see what happens, which that would have to be pretty scary for the normal person, but he's like already primed.
We already know that he's not your average guy.
Right.
So, yeah. And just allowing it to flow, just letting it rip. And the thing I wanted to mention here that I already ordered on Amazon, and Crystal, we may have to do this. We may have to re-examine our book list.
Okay.
He says that the entire class, that class that he taught for however many years he taught it at the university, he put into a book called The Search for Truth,
Shush.
which is still selling on Amazon, girl.
I did read that, but I didn't even think to look that up.
And it's available, and it's on
it?
Amazon, $12.95.
Oh my gosh. All right, I'm going to get it. I'm getting so many books. I also have another podcast called Life Magnetics, in which I interview a lot of thought leaders and spiritual thinkers. And I'm just encountering so many cool books. I'm like, oh, we got to put this in the miraculous thinking pipeline. Yeah. But okay, because what happens is he opens his mouth and it sounds to me like channeling. It sounds to me like just putting himself in the flow and teaching these kids what they most need to hear. And I think he starts off with like 20 students, but then more people start gravitating, hearing about this awesome class. And so soon there's kids that are just hanging outside of the door trying to get like just a little bit of a glimpse or just to hear what he's teaching. And it grows and grows and grows in popularity because all he's doing is allowing spirit to speak through him without the ego. And that's always it. Like, when you want to be the vessel for divine spirit, all you have to do is figure out how to get out of the way. That's it. And so he doesn't prepare. He doesn't take notes. He doesn't have note cards. He just shows up and gets out of the way, and magical things happen. He surrenders to that.
And he also, something that I think is very important that most of us struggle with is there is a part where you don't overvalue yourself by believing in your ego, but you don't undervalue yourself and you believe that you are capable, because he doesn't doubt himself at all. Mm-hmm. He knows when I step in there, because I am connected and I'm an intelligent guy, I have done the work, I've done the research, I've done the study, so I have it in me. It's not like this guy never studied anything, showed up in the middle of a class and was like, let me edify you. Like, there is that part of the doing, which was years of practice and dedication and devotion, which then spirit uses and elevates to a different level. So there is that part that we need to do as human beings to prepare.
Which is what I referenced a little bit or implied with the tuning fork, like priming
Yes.
yourself through practice, meditation, him out on his land, him pursuing the
Yeah.
inner worlds, understanding himself in this deeper way, and also understanding God in this deeper way. That gets him prepared to just be the vessel. So he shows up and
Yes.
he does exactly that. And I can just imagine if that were me, I would be still narrating in my head. My mind would be like, are you sure though? You're not going to take any notes. You're not going to prepare at all. Okay, we'll see
Yeah.
what happens. There would be some
Exactly.
fear. So it does really speak to the amount of, I hate to call it work, but the amount of refinement that he's been
Refinement. That's a good word.
undergoing.
Yeah.
So that's cool. We'll get that book.
So the search for truth.
We're adding it to the roster.
We're gonna have to
I
we're gonna
know.
have to meet 3 days a week to
I
do this
know. Hope
podcast to
that's
get through all
okay,
these.
everybody. Oh,
Yeah.
so then the next chapter, I think he meets Sandy Boone, who's a lady who's wandering around on her property, who I would have had removed by the police, but that's
Oh
okay.
yeah.
That's me.
Yeah.
That's me and my Taurus
That's
nature.
just me.
So my house. But he allows it, and of course, those meditation groups have been going on for 40 years. But then he goes to the Kriya retreat in Northern California. Summer has arrived, and he notices that he can go and opt to do a silent retreat. He doesn't really want to talk with anybody. He doesn't really want to interact in that way. He just wants to utilize this time and space and teaching to optimize his connection. That's all he wants to do. Um, he then has a dream, which is interesting. While he's at the retreat, he has a dream. And in this dream, he's entering a cave and journeying deeper and deeper into the cave. And he's noticing, and this is what I want to talk to you about. He's noticing in his dream, as he's going deeper into the cave, that the air is getting thinner and thinner.
Mhm.
And it's actually becoming more difficult to breathe the deeper he goes. And he recognizes that this actually happens in his meditations as well. Like he'll notice sometimes he's so deep in meditation that he has to gasp and like gulp in air and then kind of reset himself and go back in. Has that ever happened to you? It's happened to me many times.
All the time. Especially when you do Kriya, yoga, pranayama, when you do any kind of the breath work before you go into it, you hyperoxygenate. So you don't really need to take the breaths. And that hyperoxygenation brings you to this level of depth and stillness. And then the breathing becomes so slow. And sometimes you just don't even want to take the breath. You're just watching it and you're like,
Mhm.
I want to stay here
I
in this.
become
And then
annoyed that I
you
have to
become
breathe.
annoyed that you have to breathe, right?
Well, I'm like,
Yes.
it pulls me out of the experience that I'm having because I feel like what's probably really happening is I'm out of body for the most part. I'm
Yes.
in another dimension, but I'm still, of course, tethered to the human instrument, and that instrument has to breathe. So it's like this
Yeah.
dance that you do, like you're regulating your human functions, but you're trying to be as present as possible in the experience.
Yeah.
So this is what he's noticing in the dream, not unlike his meditation. The deeper he goes into this cave in his dream, the thinner the air is and the harder it is to breathe. He finally gets to this place where he can see a light kind of at the end of the cave. He moves toward it, and ultimately he's kind of standing right below it. It's a blinding, beautiful light. He reaches up into the light because that's all he wants. He wants to go into the light. He wants more of this light. And he notices he feels kind of like a metal grate. Like, nope, you can't enter here. Right. And so then he makes his way all the way out of the cave. And when he wakes up, he's thinking about that dream. What do you think that dream was about?
Well, I think he's been called to the light. That's what he's been doing his entire life is this call to the light, but he's trying to do it by leaving behind his body.
Mhm.
He's trying to abandon the person. And the message to me of the dream was, no, this experience involves both.
Right.
And I think that was why he then suddenly wakes up and has this change of heart about how he's going to relate to himself going forward.
Right. And he realizes that in order to ascend, which would be to go into the light or to have that transcendental experience, he cannot be out of his body. He's got to take the body
Right.
with him. He's also got to
With
take
him.
this thinking mind with him. He's got to take
Mhm.
his little me, his higher me, all the me's have
All
got
the
to
me's.
make that ascension. You can't do it without him. And this is where, interestingly and so beautifully, he starts to develop compassion for that inner person that he's been so disciplined about kind of
Oh,
locking into a box. And um,
yes.
let me, if I can, I'm just going to read this because I think it's so beautiful. He says, something much wiser than me had reached into my psyche that night and rearranged my entire relationship with myself. I no longer saw the lower aspect of myself, with all his personal issues and melodramas, as the enemy that had to be destroyed. I looked at him now with a new understanding. I needed to use all these disturbed personal energies for my ascent. It was perfectly clear to me that since he was the problem, he was also the solution. I actually felt a tinge of compassion toward the struggling person within me. I would later come to learn that the Bhagavad Gita says that one should raise the self with self, not trample down the self. I had been trampling down my personal self in the name of getting free from his humanness. I now needed to learn how to raise those energies up to assist me on the journey. And one more piece, if I can, because it's so beautiful. And I was in the car when I was listening to this with my husband, and I started crying. He's like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "Nothing. It's just so beautiful." He writes, that morning when I stopped on my way to the temple, I closed my eyes and opened the giant wooden doors to that very special room. And previous to this, he explained that when he meditated, he saw himself in this beautiful room with like glass walls, and it was like a specific room that he would enter into. The person I had left sitting on the meditation seat immediately straightened himself up. As I approached him, he became more disciplined and focused. In drastic contrast to how strict I had been in the past, I reached my hand out to him in a kind and caring manner and said, "You can come out now." What followed that utterance makes me ashamed to this day for thinking this practice was some sort of an innocent mind game. The moment I said those words, I experienced an emotional release, the intensity of which I had never imagined possible. Tears poured from my eyes, and my legs completely buckled beneath me. My heart broke open as though some major event had taken place that allowed for a lifetime's worth of relief. And I don't know why that hit me so deeply, other than I can relate to trying to lock parts of myself away and deny their aliveness in me, pretending that's not me anymore, pretending I don't need to sit in that in order to be where I am now, and neglecting caring for those versions of me. And so when he walks into his meditation room in his mind, and this other me kind of sits up straight. Oh God, here he comes.
Mhm.
Here he comes.
Mhm.
I got to be as disciplined and focused as possible. It's just like, I don't, oh my gosh, I do that to myself all the time. And I can see so many ways that I do it to myself right now, in the way that I
Yeah.
look, in the way that I feel about my physical appearance, the way I talk to myself in my head about how I show up physically in the world. Oh my gosh, I'm so unkind.
Yeah.
What would happen if I instead approached that me with compassion and love and acceptance and come on, let's go, we're in this together? I don't know, it just had a really profound impact on me. What did you think about that?
I had the same thing. I almost felt like, I mean, what I felt was like I had a choked, like cry, like that I didn't even let myself express
Mm-hmm.
when I was reading it. I honestly just shoved it down deeper. But yeah, this idea of disowning ourselves and the cruelty that we inflict on ourselves over the course of our lives is really you should probably go to jail, for the things
Mm-hmm.
that you tell yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
and recognizing that that thing that he said, that line where he said that he had always thought that that was like an experiment, or what was that line you read when he said that he had always thought that it was like insignificant, that imagining himself in the meditation room with this version of himself. There's a line he uses there that he wanted to put like kind of punish himself, or he was ashamed of himself
Mm-hmm.
Look for that part where it says, and I was ashamed for how he had basically gone through life thinking that this is not a big deal, that I'm imagining this guy and I'm correcting him and I'm reprimanding him. This visualization, because on some level, that me that lives in there in that image is as real as
Yes.
the one watching. And so, in
Yes.
essence, you really are torturing a real living thing, the thing that lives in your mind, that is your small self. You are just keeping them locked up in a
Mm-hmm.
dungeon and beating them up every day. And it struck him by the degree of what
Mm-hmm.
happened when he actually apologized in a way, reached
Mm-hmm.
out and basically said, God, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I've been what that energy was feeling, and what a relief. Like, oh my
Yeah.
God, you're not here to punish me. You're not here to criticize me anymore. Can you imagine? And so I'm not ready to have that emotional release, so I didn't let myself have that. But
Right.
but I can imagine that. I hope that someday I will, because
Yeah.
you're right. It's just ridiculous.
It's all you. It's all
It's all
you.
you. How can
And
you hate yourself?
the
You know?
exact line is what followed that utterance, which is, you can come out now. What
Mm-hmm.
follows that utterance makes me ashamed to this day for thinking this practice was some sort of an innocent mind game.
This
Yeah.
practice was an innocent mind game, and
Yeah.
don't we do that?
Yeah.
Like we just assume these things that you're talking yourself. It's positive, or what is it? Negative reinforcement. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you tell yourself, oh, you're so fat, you're so this, you're so that. You're looking in the mirror and you think that's just whatever. You
Mm-hmm.
don't really give it the weight, and you don't even know what you're doing.
Right.
It's really scary.
And I think how many of us do that and we don't even think about that we're doing that.
Mm-mm.
And so this is why it's so important. I mean, really profound to develop the ability to pop out and observe yourself and the things that you say to yourself, much less the things you were saying about other people, which is just a reflection of how you feel about yourself. How many crystals are in meditation rooms and cages,
Wow.
throughout me that I need to liberate because of the way I think about my own self.
Yeah. I think mine is like that guy that locked up his kid in the basement and let her live there for like 10 years or 20 years before she escaped. Like, I feel like mine is that far underground, the aspects of myself that I don't claim, or
Yeah.
that I wish that I wasn't, or that I'm ashamed of, and it's very, that's why you can't have peace,
Hmm.
because you're constantly trying to keep something out. We all are
Hmm.
keeping, and who are we keeping out but the thing that completes us?
Keeping
Isn't
them
that
out or
crazy?
keeping them in control. Yes.
Keeping
Did
them
you
in or keeping it out, or
just walk this line? Don't step out of
yeah,
line.
yeah.
Um, have you seen the movie Barbarian?
No,
Do you watch scary movies?
no.
I didn't imagine you did. But it's about this Airbnb and there's an underground tunnel in the basement. You're talking about keeping yourself like in the
No.
basement. I'm just, oh my, I'm not going to give it
I'm
away. It is
basing
the
it to, please don't
most,
tell me.
it is the craziest movie. If anybody has watched it, it's the most insane movie. But I can just see you in the tunnels down there. The use that you
Did you? Thank you, Crystal. Thanks for putting that in my mind. Thank you so much. Here's a question. Did you watch, I think it was like a Dateline, or it's actually a Netflix documentary about
Hmm.
this guy that actually locked, it's a true story. It's somewhere weird, like in Europe. And
Mm-mm.
this guy locked his daughter in the basement and actually fathered children with her.
Oh my gosh.
She had babies down there in the
That's like
basement.
Barbarian.
Is that like Barbarian? So
Hmm.
then that's based on a
Maybe
true
it's
story.
inspired by.
Yeah, inspired by.
It's crazy.
How do we go there?
I
How
don't
do
know.
we ever
Just
go
where
there?
we like
Tangent.
how deep and dark we keep these parts of ourselves locked away.
Yes.
I don't know why.
Yes. Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
so while he's at the retreat, after coming to this like really important realization about himself, he begins the process of integrating those lower aspects, which I don't even like calling them lower aspects as opposed to like other aspects, with his higher aspects, and understands that this is how he's going to truly reach enlightenment, which I thought was, again, so profound. And after that, he heads back to Florida, and this is where he finds Sandy Boone building a house on his land.
And good old Sandy.
Call the SWAT team. He experiences resistance to this, like, what? This is my land. And at her audacity, but ultimately surrenders to it and allows her to do so. And over time, more meditators begin to build cabins on his land. Another meditator actually purchased the property just behind his, and that guy, he's a yogi as well. His name is Bob. And one day, Bob asks Mickey to go visit someone in prison. I guess Bob, the yogi who buys the property behind him,
Hmm.
says, "Hey, I typically visit this person named Jerry in prison, but I can't for whatever reason. So can you go and visit him?" And he surrenders and he says yes. He goes to the prison and he meets Jerry, and this begins a new ministry in his life because he's talking to Jerry about all the things that he's talking to his students about. And Jerry is at that space in life where he has the capacity and the vibration to understand it and click into that. And they have these beautiful conversations. Jerry starts inviting other prisoners to come in and meditate and learn. Jerry is ultimately transferred to another prison, but it sounds like Mickey continues at that prison to continue to minister to those prisoners, but also goes to another prison. So he opens up a new area of purpose in his life. What did you think about that?
I thought it was so beautiful.
Me too.
Oh, I loved it. And I always think that if there was one thing they should introduce into the jail system is mandatory meditation,
Mm-hmm.
like really helping the inmates figure out how to heal, and sit at least in a state that's not so dark and heavy, like the
Mm-hmm.
regular vibration of a jail, so that the more that they can escape to these little moments of light,
Mm-hmm.
slowly but surely everybody can elevate. Because it's just, when I was in college, for one semester I went down to Florida. I went to college in Wellesley in Massachusetts, but I did one semester in Florida because I was obsessed with criminology. I actually wanted to be a criminologist for a
Really? I
while.
did not know this.
Yeah, I did. And while I was there, I remember that I used to do volunteer at like Crime Stoppers, and you would get the tips, and I would go sometimes for ride-alongs with the cops that I became friends with.
Wow.
And yeah, and we would go, sometimes I would go to the juvie, and just like sit, like they would let me sit with some of the kids and talk, and about mindset, about different things. Just juvenile detention,
Mm-hmm.
which is not like jail. When I walked into that place, I remember the first day I walked in, when you have to walk through this hallway and they're all playing in this outdoor area, but there's like a glass window. And all these people ran and like hit on the windows and did all sort of like lascivious like gestures and things. The energy was so heavy, it was so raw and like primal. And I said to myself, how can anybody get better here? How can whatever brought you here be healed here when there's no tools to heal it with?
Right.
So for me, what he did is super necessary, and I wish more people would do it.
It reminds me of this story of, I think, what was his name? I think it was Hewlin. Anyway, it's about Ho'oponopono, which
Uh,
is the forgiveness prayer. And it's really simple. It's, "I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you." Right? And we've spoken about Ho'oponopono before. But he was called into a prison system where the recidivism rate was really high, meaning as soon as they leave, they reoffend, they come right on back. And long story short, he teaches all of the prisoners how to do Ho'oponopono. They do it together. And within a fairly short amount of time, first of all, the prisoners are so much more happy, lighter. The vibe in the whole place has changed, but also the
mm,
recidivism rate goes way, 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 way down. Just the power
wow.
of even a prayer, just giving somebody something that would allow them to forgive themselves and to forgive others and make themselves feel that love is just, it's life changing. And there's not enough of that being offered in our prison
No.
systems. But I would argue, just generally, secularly,
Oh
not enough
yeah,
of this being offered.
absolutely.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of this section. Well, actually, technically, we kind of went out of order a little
A
bit.
little,
I think right
yeah,
after
it's
that, he
okay.
goes, yeah, back to his school and he's teaching these inspired classes. And we're going to now get the book to read at a future time. So,
Yes.
next, what we're going to be doing is reading section 3, which is
Hmm.
entitled From Solitude to Service. And I'm very much looking forward to it. We will cover that
Yes.
next week when we return.
I am loving this.
Any
Loving this
final
book.
any final thoughts? I mean, how is this inspiring you in the way
Well,
that you're thinking and being and doing, Elenique?
so the last note that I took on that last section is when he says, "This is not something I would have come up with on my own. My whole being thought my path to self realization was about meditation. Fortunately, life knew better, and she was starting to guide me away from myself through service to others." And I have to say that I really resonated with that because for years I thought that I had to find myself through meditation, through inner work, and through these things for years, and took a very isolated approach to life. And the experiences that I have had to go through, that life has given me, have made me realize the exact same thing, that it's only through service to others and reaching out. And even my coaching at the beginning, I used to do a lot of hypnotherapy for, regular issues like you want to stop smoking, you want to lose weight, you want to do this, that. But as I've gone deeper now, I've really refined even my coaching to specializing in grief and loss, because those are the lessons. And I didn't want to do it.
Mm.
I didn't want to do it because I was like, this is so heavy for me. I've been through so much stuff. I don't want to be opening up grief and loss every day. But it's like every time somebody new would come to me, it would be somebody that lost
Mm.
somebody, that lost a loved one. It was a woman that was going through cancer. And I was like, oh my God, I have to do this again. But then when I stopped resisting and just said, well, God, if you've given me all these experiences to know how to navigate this, and this is who you need me to serve, then let me serve and let me embrace the serving, as opposed to thinking I'm going to determine what I am going to do. And everything has just flowed since that moment, including what I've been given to work with in holding that space. And I'm not doing it alone, and I feel it. When I'm sitting there with people, I know I'm not alone. It's like, it makes me want to cry because it's so strong. So it's so pretty. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for it because it's transformed my loss. It's transformed it for me and given it meaning. And so I'm very, very grateful.
Mm. I love you. Yes. There's this idea that, and I can see how we can get lost sometimes in thinking, well, law of attraction, I manifest, I'm the creator of my universe and my life. And that's true, we do. But it was always meant to be in conjunction with a higher power. It was always meant to be a collaborative imagining into being of a life. And this idea that the universe or God or spirit knows best. I think the Bible refers to it, maybe it was a hymn, calling God the rock that is higher than I, like meaning different viewpoint, can see the whole thing, knows how to get there, can see the destination, that rock that is higher than I. We can trust that there is something bigger at play. And for those of us who have a hard time letting go of control, calling the police on Sandy Boone on my property, that would be me.
You're so funny.
I mean, it is.
You're so funny.
The request being made is, can you trust it though? Can you trust this higher intelligence? Do you believe in it? Some people
Yes.
don't believe in it.
No.
Do you trust in this higher intelligence? Also, this intelligence that loves you. That beautiful scripture in Jeremiah, see, I know the plans that I have made for you. I know what they are. Plans to give you a future and a hope. Do you believe that? So in me, this is inspiring so much allowance. We always go back to Gethsemane with Crystal Compton. Just please take this.
It's never complete without
It's never complete without Gethsemane, but just please take this cup, but thy will be done, because I trust that you know how to use my life to the highest benefit of all, not just me and what I want. These are amazing things to contemplate and to help us shift shift our awareness in the way that we do things and interact with God, and trust. So beautiful. What a good book. This is a good book,
Amazing. I'm
everybody. If you
so
haven't
excited. Yeah.
gotten it, you should go out and get The Surrender Experiment by Michael A. Singer. Follow along. And absolutely, once again, if you guys have any comments, opinions, thoughts, we love to hear them. Write to us at miraculousthinking@gmail.com. And also, we have a Facebook group.
And it's a great Facebook group. They are just the best. They are always posting, supporting each other, and writing comments, and they're just great.
It's wonderful. So if you are interested in joining us, you can find us on Facebook by just searching for Miraculous Thinking, or link in the description of this audio or video, depending on where you are consuming this content. And Elenique and I are in talks about our first workshop together, because we have so many things we want to talk about and teach about.
Many.
Of course, we have things that are in our individual wheelhouses, but so many areas where we intersect. But I
Yes.
do anticipate an announcement coming, just so that we can get together as a community and shift some stuff.
But we wanna really explore how to transform the things that are holding us back, and shedding those things, shedding those beliefs, and really stepping into that energy, and really stepping into alignment with this loving force that is our strength, and learning how to partner with it in humility, but with faith and belief in ourselves, which go together, believe
Yes.
it or not. You can have self-respect and self-worth and self-trust, and align with something greater than yourself.
And I think we need this technology, this spiritual technology now more than ever. And I think we need to come together to help everyone shift it, understand, make some new choices, see themselves in a different way, and liberate the little you inside that just wants to be alive with you and ascend with you and help you to get there. I just love the idea of that. Thank you, Mickey Singer. You're awesome.
Thank you.
Oh,
One of my mentors, my hypnotherapy mentor, Matthew Brownstein, he lived with Mickey Singer, and he himself has written many books, beautiful books as well. He's a very intelligent, lovely man. But yeah, he actually met him and lived with him back in the woods. He even has his own meditation school online. It's called Online Monastery.
Oh, wow.
Where, yeah, it's amazing. I highly recommend it if you want to check it out. It's called Online Monastery. His name is Matthew Brownstein, and he just teaches meditation, and basically utilizes this whole concept that we've been exploring with Mickey. Yes, meditation is to go up, but then he teaches you how to come down and ground it. And it's free. He just wants to give it away because he thinks that that's really what he's here to do. So he just puts it online. You can follow along, you can watch the videos. I believe he made a community where you can ask questions. His whole philosophy is called anahat meditation, so heart driven, heart chakra, heart opening. But he studies the geometry, the beautiful, complex, spiritual geometry. He wrote a whole book about that. I mean, he's just very, very lovely, intelligent, fascinating person. So
wonderful. Thank you for the resource. We love a good, deep, and free resource.
Oh, he's incredible. Awesome. Yeah, that's what I love about it. He's so committed. He's just like, I just want people to do it.
Good. I love that. Just like him, he didn't want to take any money to help the banker. Exactly. He refused.
Exactly.
Well, thank you everyone for hanging out with us and talking with us about this book, listening, and I hope you're enjoying it. We will be back again next week for the Surrender Experiment. We're going to be getting into section 3, and until then, we love you. Nothing but love for you. Bye, guys.